Gabriel's Gospel Grace, changing lives and kingdom building one stone at a time.
Well, good morning to you, and welcome to this week's Motivational Monday, your weekly life coaching session. So today we're going to be looking at unlocking your potential. Now, as a life coach, and probably like many other life coaches out there, that's probably the bulk of the work we do, which is trying to realize someone's dream, which typically requires us to unlock something within that person. So today I thought we'd start by actually looking at the mechanism of unlocking a key. What's its purpose? How does that actually relate to what we do in our own lives, and especially with regards to our own potential? So let's start with the purpose of a lock. If you think about it, it's got two functions. The first, the obvious one, is to keep something secure. You know, you walk in your house and you lock and bolt the door, and that's to keep you secure inside. But at the same time, it's also being locked for the people on the outside to prevent them having access. So let's have a little bit of a history lesson and look at locks and the evolution, you could say. So here you can see a typical bolt lock. Now this is on my gate, and it serves a purpose. On the whole, it keeps the place secure. I live in farmland, and the farmer often is moving his cattle up and down the road. This keeps the gate closed, but more importantly, it stops it from being accidentally pushed open or latched open. But pay attention to the mechanism. If we actually look at this in detail, we've got one simple little brace that the bolt feeds into just to keep it secure. So the actual lock is actually very simplistic. But if you look at the bolt, that's quite a hefty bolt there. It's substantial. We can tell that's going to last a while. And that clearly has. In fact, I had to simply change the screws on it. The bolt was actually working very well. And it still does. It's very simple in design, but it serves an important function. And it's strong. You can see how substantial that is. That's about as thick as my finger. So that's a simplistic method of looking at the whole point of unlocking a key. Now in this case, it's not so much a key, but it's a mechanism of keeping something secure or preventing access. Clearly from this device, it's not really preventing access. Although you may observe that there's a kind of loop on the end where you can actually put a padlock through it to keep it more secure. So from that point of view, it's got a double feature. Now, I know we sound like we're talking all mechanical here, but this really does have a role to play within our own lives. So we'll come on to that shortly. Let's have a look at another one. So we've moved forward in time a little more. And here we have something that's, again, is quite typical. The key will go in the lock. It will move the mechanism and allow a latch to lift up and down. And on the other side, it is simply just a latch mechanism. So it's slightly more advanced, and in this case we obviously have a key that's designed specifically for that lock, preventing anyone from accessing, unlike the bolt where you can simply reach over and undo it. Now in this case it's to keep a shed secure. It stops people accidentally just opening up and walking in, and obviously anyone can't access it without the key. But it still doesn't stop anyone who chooses to actually get into a place. I mean, this is the whole point of crime. Criminals will always find a way. And often, if they're coming to case your place or steal from you, they will come prepared with all the tools to do the job. But the point is, it also gives us a sense of security. We feel it's safe. We feel anyone comes to sort of just try and open the door, they can't get in. They'd have to make the effort. But also observe, though, that as far as the security side of the mechanism goes, it's more robust. It's concealed within the door itself. The key has to be accessed from outside, and in fact the key, the bolt you could say of the key, the shaft is obviously a lot more narrow but still relatively strong. So we can already see that as far as the security level or the blocking access, that seems to be increasing, while our key is getting more complex but actually getting slightly smaller. So let's jump on again. And now we move into a slightly more modern variation. Now we have a much more complex lock with pins and tumblers, and they all have to line up exactly right, and then it will allow the mechanism to turn and release the catch. So the actual mechanism in the door has now got far more complicated. The key actually, even though it appears more complicated, it's actually more simplified than the previous one. You'll also notice, of course, and you all have your own key, it's much more narrow. Keys like this have been known to snap in the lock. The previous key is clearly more substantial, less likely to snap, and if we go back to the primitive basic one, that's not going to snap. In fact, if anything, if you try to kick that gate open, it's more likely that the gate will give way before the bolt. So what's going on here? Well, what we can see is every time we try and make things more secure, in that development, the focus is not so much on the key. In fact, the key, it is moving relatively small with regards to evolving in its design. But the mechanism of how we secure something is getting more advanced and more complicated. In fact, with that complexity, we're also restricting access. Now, of course, the next level from this, as we know, is digital access. And I was talking to someone just the other day, and I'm sure this will come up on Watchman Wednesday, but talking about access to your bank account and your money. You know, as a child, you might have had a money box and you put your money in your money box, and perhaps mum and dad was the bank. Every time you wanted something from the money box, you'd have to have permission, and they would simply access that. Perhaps when you became a teenager, or before you were old enough to have your own account, perhaps your parents used to put in a bank account. So now if you wanted access, there'd be the extra effort of having to go to the bank, present your book and your card, and get that money out. Now, in the same vein of supposedly simplicity, as we saw with the key here, now we have a case of you should be able to access this with your phone, or we obviously have chip and pin. But actually, from the other side of it, that accessibility is getting more complicated. Having the key does not guarantee access. It does keep things secure though, so secure that even you can't access it. And there are cases like this with new cars and new key fobs and various things where the driver gets locked out. But I had that experience myself once and had to call a repair company to come and break in. And ironically, if you've never done this before, the guy literally said, "Please look away, because what I'm about to do is going to scare you." Within seconds, he was inside that car while it was fully locked, proving the point that the more advanced the system was, it wasn't actually doing anything more than giving me a sense of false security, but at the same time denying me access. So now let's come back to me and you. To unlock our potential, we have to understand the lock. Now, my role as a life coach, and even more so as a minister, is to facilitate identifying the tumblers within that lock, identifying exactly how we push each pin in turn so that we can get just that right access. And once we unlock it, then we can let, well, success start to flow. It might drip at first, but again, it will flow. So the key is, how do we literally access the key? Being secure in ourselves often means there is some sense of denying of ourselves. And that denying normally comes from negatives. It's normally a sense of protection. As we say, when we lock something up, it's to keep something secure. So what are you keeping secure? Do you have personal hang-ups about your image? Do you have personal hang-ups about your success? Do you feel it's your socio-economic status? Do you feel it's to do with your parenting and how you were brought up? Do you feel that you're just not worthy? Do you feel stupid? Do you feel insignificant? Do you feel unworthy of success? I don't know them answers. Only you can work them out. But that means, as we talked last week, hard look in the mirror. Same scenario now. You've got to really kind of scrutinize yourself. So the task for this week would be simply to create a small list. And on one side, I want you to put strengths. And on the other side, being very honest, I want you to put weaknesses. You need to identify what your weaknesses are and see how they relate to those strengths, because often somewhere within there is the whole thing that's holding you back. Now, as a coach, and especially business coaching, I've had people say to me, "Oh yes, but it's not fair. I don't have the academic qualifications. I don't have mummy and daddy being able to fund my scheme and projects and entrepreneurship." But that really doesn't stop. That does not stop success. I remember a person coming to me with a little bit of a chip on the shoulder that they've had a hard life, and ironically, it was never their fault. They had no contribution to their failings in life, which obviously was part of my life coaching with them, and we turned that round in the end. But one of the things that they said was, it was a man's world, men have all the advantage. Being a woman, she had no success in business. She also then highlighted that capitalism was also dominating the world, and capitalism's a bad thing. So I had to challenge her and say, well, if we take both of those to be true, then there is a contradiction. Because I promise you, from a corporate capitalist perspective, if you came up with £1 billion or $1 billion idea and you presented it to anyone, even if that person personally didn't like or value you, based on your assumption of capitalists, there's no way they would turn you down. So it's not all about the idea. The reality is that either your idea is not good enough, you've not been thorough and robust enough with your planning, or you've not been able to present it in the right way. But to walk away as a failure, that's your choice. Being denied an answer, being denied a success, is not a reason to give up. But at that point, you probably put the lock on. The question is, how much security did you put into that lock? Have you made life far too complicated? So the second point for this week is about keeping it simple. Now, I know there's a teacher I know quite well who uses the phrase keep it simple, saints. I think the worldly version is keep it simple, stupid. But I think that's important. Sometimes you have to try and simplify the problem. Now, of course, things are complicated. As an engineer putting things in space, you can't simply just wing it and make up numbers. It has to be thought through, planned, scrutinized, and mathematics has to be triple checked. But the concept is simple. Designing the plan how to move forward is simple. So looking at yourself, where are you today? What are the obstacles? What has created the barriers? What is the security you've put in place? Now, in the Bible, Jesus often refers to children. And I think the reason he refers to children accessing the kingdom and other things is because they do look at the world in a simplistic way. Very simple. But as adults, we learn to complicate things. In fact, if anything, we overcomplicate everything. So today, that's part of our issue. Why are we overcomplicating our life? What are the barriers we've put in there? And what are we keeping secure? Because remember, by keeping things secure, the flip side of that is we're also denying access. Now, in relationships, most people are denying access to friendships and certainly access to love. I know for a fact that people that have been hurt in bad relationships, cheated on, abused, it's very hard for them people to ever trust and love again. But that keeping yourself secure, keeping yourself protected, is also denying access to others loving you. That means you push people away. You may not be conscious you're doing that, but you are. And that is the problem with success too. When we lock things and secure things, we're also denying access to things. And I know that the Bible talks about this, and I'm sure we'll be covering this on a Theology Thursday. But we're denying our successes through a lack of faith and a lack of hope. So, to repeat the task for this week, go and make a list of your strengths and weaknesses. Scrutinise those strengths and weaknesses. Identify what you're keeping secure and why. Be honest with yourself and be true. Because then, we can discover your personal unique key to unlocking your personal potential. I do believe God made everyone unique for a reason and a purpose. I know some of you watching that are probably not in that place of faith yet, but I promise you, find your lock, we'll unlock that key together. For the rest of this week, may God's grace be with you. If you were blessed by this video, why not give it a like? Also, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos.